After the Revolutionary War, we had to make some important decisions about the lands to the northwest of Ohio. Congress passed two different ordinances, the first one in 1785 and the second in 1787. The first one was called the Land Ordinance of 1785, and it described how the land would be portioned out, and it divided the land into townships. Each of the townships was 6 square miles. The townships were divided into 36 sections, each of which was 1 square mile. One section in each township would be sold to support the public schools, and the lands covered by the land ordinance would later be known as the Northwest Territory. And this region is actually what would become where we live: Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and part of Minnesota. The second law in 1787 determined how the area would be governed, and it set up a plan for how the Western territories could become new states as their populations grew. So when a territory had a population of 5,000 free men, and I think that's an important word right there, free men, the people could elect their own assembly, and when the territory had 60,000 people, they could apply to become a state with the same rights as all of the other states. The Northwest Ordinance also called for a public university and decreed that there would be a trial by jury and freedom of religion. And it furthermore banned slavery in those states. So as a federal government, as we were creating new territories, slavery was an issue. And while the southern states at that point, still were able to keep their slaves, any new territories that were created, any new states that came into the nation, slavery was not allowed. So what are some of the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation? So it didn't take long before there were some serious incidents that broke out, and people realized, we got a lot of problems here. In June 1783, there was a group of veterans that arrived at the Pennsylvania State House. And that's where the National Congress was in session. And these troops protested. They stuck bayonets through the windows. They demanded their back wages. And the people there were, scared, and they fled the city because they didn't have any money to pay these soldiers who just fought for our freedom. The Articles of Confederation had given the states the power to levy taxes, and the states were supposed to send some of that money to Congress, but they did not send very much. So Congress could not pay what it owed the soldiers, and many of them were farmers, and they were struggling, and those struggles were made worse because the price of their crops was falling and falling. So, like most of the states, Massachusetts found itself in some serious financial problems. And even though its people didn't have the money to pay their taxes, the state continued levying high taxes. What does that sound like? People couldn't pay it, but the state is still collecting it. That kind of sounds like what we just went through, right? From why we left the British Kingdom and became our own country. And this put a lot of people into some serious debt. They weren't able to pay their mortgages. They lost their land. And the people kept going to the government and asking for help. But the government in Massachusetts refused to lower the taxes. They refused to provide relief for their citizens. And so in autumn of 1786, a Revolutionary War veteran named Daniel Shays, he led an armed uprising that began in western Massachusetts. So marching to the east, he and his mob of farmers actually closed the county courts to stop land foreclosures. And in January of 1787, Daniel Shays led more than 1,000 men to attack the federal arsenal in Springfield, Massachusetts. Other states started to worry about the possibility of the spread of this rebellion. Pennsylvania, in an order signed by Benjamin Franklin, supported Massachusetts, and they offered a reward for the arrest of Daniel Shays and for 3 other people who were leading this rebellion. So a large force of the state militia defeated Shays eventually, and the uprising collapsed. But the rebels had made their point, and soon Massachusetts passed laws that would help the indebted farmers. I mean, if you think about it, we just had this big war that we fought. And one of the principal reasons that we fought was because the British government was taxing us, right? And they were taxing us unfairly without representation. So here are these poor farmers who lost their farms. They lost their homes. The government is taxing them. They can't afford to pay. And what do they get for their loyal service to our country? They get the shaft. So, okay, so we are going to stop here so that you can go back in and read the letters to from Abigail Adams to her husband, and then play the bucket game, The Powers of the Confederation Congress.